Welcome back DIY Squad. Have I got a project for you? My wife wanted one of those fire tables that you could just put out on the deck. Now we could be like everybody else and just go to a big box store and buy one of the pre-made ones, but we wanted to be a little bit more unique. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how we built a fire table. Let's go. I started out by doing a basic drawing of how I might want this to look. Like most weekend projects I've done lately, I pretty much just figured it out as I went along. I should have done better with the planning, and you'll soon see why. Jumping right into it, I started by making the frame to the top. I had some extra 2x6s from another project that I worked on, and I thought I'd save some money because lumber prices suck. I cut them down to the length of my top and moved over to the sketchy table saw to rip them down. Look at this clunker. I got it at a pawn shop, and as a new homeowner, I really don't have a lot of money to throw at a tool that I don't use too much up to this point. So I ripped these down to about 2 inches thick, and I want to keep them that way because once I start piling on all the products for this tabletop, it ends up about 3.5 inches thick. I pre-drill my holes to prevent any wood splitting, and then screw them together to make the outer frame of the tabletop. I worked to put some cross members on the frame and used the burner pan for this fire table to figure out where to put the cross members. With the top frame done, I moved on to the bottom frame. I already made my cuts earlier when I was cutting the lumber down from the top frame, so all I had to do was assemble at this point. On one end, I did rip down the 2x6s, and that was so I could slide the propane tank through the opening. I plan to panel the outside of this, so I really don't care how ridiculous this frame looks, but I think we can all agree that it looks really ridiculous. I mean, it's made out of 2x6s, like some NFL linebacker was going to use it to do some table dancing. Oh, right here. See why I had to rip down those pieces? I then added even more lumber to this base. This will be the bottom of the table. I'm doing this because I want some kind of toe kick at the bottom. To make this even more fancy, I added these adjustable feet. This will keep the wood off the ground and improve the airflow if water gets under it. It also allows me to adjust to make sure that it's level. Now I didn't have an Allen wrench big enough for this insert, so I figured just jamming a screwdriver in there and turning it would do the trick. And you know what? It did do the trick. I know I used the wrong tool for this job, whatever. But this is the first house I've owned and I don't really have a garage full of tools yet. Up to this point, I've always borrowed tools from my friends and family to get by. So as this channel grows, you will also see a variety of my tools grow too. So if you want to support me in this channel, please like and subscribe down below. It's completely free to you and allows me to continue bringing out new projects. With the framing complete, I started to put on the cement Backerboard, or this brand name product, Wonderboard, sold at my local home center with orange aprons. I really do like this stuff. It's non-combustible, so a good use around fire, and it's unaffected by water. So this will be great for outdoors. Cutting this is easy, but it is messy. You just score a line with a blade, bend the board along the score line, and then cut the backside. Kinda like cutting drywall. Now I couldn't figure out how to cut out the center with the tools that I have on hand, so I had to break this down further than I intended. I did want this as one solid piece, but oh well. When you're working with cement board, there are special screws you will need to use for this. Typically they're sold right next to the cement boards themselves, so you shouldn't have a hard time finding them. Now I did leave a 1/2 inch overhang on the edges because I'm also putting cement board along the edge. Now it's time to start laying tile. This tile was a little more expensive than I think it should have been, so I wanted to start by laying it out and using the burner pan to get an idea of what it might look like. I really recommend doing this, especially if you have unique shapes and designs. Now if you're a tile expert, you're really going to love watching me do this. Now I've installed backsplashes, flooring, and other types of DIY tile projects, but this one had its own challenges. The biggest one was the ambient temperature was about 100 degrees in the garage. We had this crazy heat wave that came through and it caused the tile adhesive to dry quickly. So I really had to work one tile at a time, and that made this a bit messy. You can also see I have an aluminum border. I've seen these screwed into place and I've seen them done just like I'm doing in here. I opted not to screw them in because the screw head might not allow me to lay the tile down as evenly. I used a spare block of wood to make sure everything was pressed flush since these tiles are made up of a bunch of smaller stones. For the corners, I did miter them so they look sharp, instead of just butting them together like I've seen other people do. Because these are made of aluminum, you can actually cut them on your miter saw. Just make sure you go slowly and everything is secure. I tape the corners as well to make sure they stay tight while the adhesive dries. By the way, doing these edges sucked. My trowel was too wide, so I had to resort to just piling the adhesive on with a putty knife and then back buttering the tiles. Doing it this way does cause for excess adhesive to smash between the stones, but as my old drill sergeant once told me, if you go wrong strong. To deal with the squeeze out, you could try to wipe it away immediately, but this stuff was so tacky that it just made the problem worse. So I waited till it was about 50 to 70% dry, and then used a utility knife to pick out the excess areas. The next day was time for grout. I used my shop vac to clean out the dust and the debris that may have been hiding between the stones. I separate the top from the base so that I can work on the bottom when the top is drying. To grout the top, you only need a few simple tools: some sponges, a grout float, a trowel to mix the grout, of course, a bucket of water, and something to mix the grout in. I just use an empty protein jug. It's great because I can just throw this away when I'm done. Now there are two common types of grout, sanded and unsanded. Unsanded is more durable, but due to the grains of sand in the grout, it can actually be harder to get it into cracks that's less than 1/8 of an inch thick. For this application, I'm using sanded grout because I do have gaps between the stones that are pretty big. To mix, you just add water and stir. You want this to be about peanut butter consistency. You don't want it to flow on its own, but not stiff enough that you have to work hard to press it into the grout lines. Once it's mixed per the instructions on the bag that you buy, then just drop it on the tile and use the float to spread it around and work it into the cracks. Because of this heat wave, you can actually see the grout drying in this time lapse. Once I have all the grout on top, I then use the sponge to lightly clean it up. Do not press hard on the sponge or you risk pushing the grout back out of the cracks. I clean it to about 90% and then let it fully dry. The rest of the haze I can just clean off later.
The grout has dried. So what I've done, you can actually see here, I've gone through and I have cleaned up this side just so you can see what it looks like with the clean rock. And then here's the side that's not done. It's still got kind of got the glaze and all that kind of stuff. But really, all you need to do is just get yourself a wet rag, wipe it.
Now let's talk sealant. Grout and some tile is pretty porous. If you have friends like mine, they will spill a drink on it, guaranteed. The sealant will prevent the grout from absorbing those drinks. Word to the wise, there are different kinds of sealants that will leave your tile with different kinds of looks. The sealant I chose will leave my tile looking wet and really does make the tile pop. I just use a roller to spread it on, and yes, how it looks wet right now is exactly how it will look when it's dry. For the base, I plan to wrap it in these cedar planks. These are meant for fencing, but they will work great for this application too. They are really rough from the store, so I give them a quick sanding to clean them up first. Instead of just laying them out horizontal or vertical, I went with an angled look. But before I secure them to the base, I wanted to paint the inner frame black. This will help hide the inner frame so you won't see them so easily between the gaps in the cedar planks. To secure the planks to the base, I use construction adhesive and 18 gauge nails.
So we've got the one side panel on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue the pattern, which means I'm going to get my next board to follow that line. We're going to wrap it all the way around this thing. I put a magnetic stop here. One reason is if you don't put a stop in here, the door is just going to close and kind of hang inward. The other thing is that it keeps it locked closed. I ended up putting these hinges on here as well.
Sounds like a great plan, right? Well, you're about to see why that plan sucks. The door will not open all the way with the hinges I have. I decided to just drive on, finish the planks, and we'll figure this out in a different way later.
As much as I thought, hey, I got the door solution solved, I can open it and all that stuff, but there's a problem. That's as far as it opens. Because of that. Because I got the wrong size hinges for what's needed here, I think what I'm gonna end up doing is just put the hinges here. Since there's no bottom here to this piece, it ends up sitting like that just above the ground. I'm just gonna end up having this door open up as a hatch instead.
After I get the door situation figured out, I move on to staining the boards black. I let it dry for a day and then went over them lightly with a sander. You can see by doing this, it brings some of the wood grain back out. Just know, this will gum up your sandpaper quickly. After this, I sprayed some polyurethane over the top to better seal the boards and give them a uniform semi-gloss look. Then I just add a simple pull handle to open the side hatch door. With the base done and the top done, it's now time to work on the fire part. You know, the whole reason we're building this. On this gas line, we have the end that connects to the propane tank, then a valve that controls the gas flow, then the end that feeds into the tray. This may look intimidating, but it was really easy to set up. Now just assemble the lines per the instructions for whatever kit you chose to purchase. Once I have the lines all hooked up, I turn on the gas and spray each connection with soapy water to see if there are any leaks. The only thing I had to do extra was drill out a hole for the control valve. Just make sure you really think through a good placement for that valve.
So here's how I messed up. Yeah, that looks like it's a great place for a hole, right? Well, I've got a 2x6 here and a 2x6 here, which means I need to drill through both of those. Both of those together is deeper than this will go. Right? So how do I fix this?
So as I move over to the correct spot to drill that hole, I contemplate how awful this is going to be to completely remove that plank and redo it. As a DIYer, I make a lot of mistakes just like everyone else out there. I try my best not to beat myself up too much about it because these are where we will learn the best lessons. Plus, I get to test my creativity on how to fix my own mistakes. Now we just set it up, attach the top to the bottom, add some propane, dump in your rock of choice, we use black glass, and voila! If I had to do this project again, there's a couple things I would do differently. For instance, I would probably use 2x4s instead of 2x6s. The base is now heavier and it made it so that there was less room to work with. And I would probably use drawer slides for the tank and attach the door like it was a drawer face instead. This way I could pull it out like it was a drawer and change out the tank when needed. So what do you think I should have done differently? Or what do you think I should do to make it better? Please comment below and just maybe I will do a Fire Table 2.0 in the future.